Okay, welcome everyone to the first class of these. I think it's just 5 classes we've scheduled for Chapter 7 of Shantideva's text. We're going to start, as we usually do, with a few prayers. Let me pull those up on the screen. And we'll definitely recite the Heart Sutra since we seem to be having some obstacles. The Heart Sutra is always a wonderful way to try to remove any obstacles to courses going as you want them to. So let's begin though with the mandala offering. So again, I think most of you are familiar with this prayer, so I don't need to say anything about it, but you can visualize the phenomenal world transformed into a beautiful paradise. And we're making this vast offering to all of our gurus, to all the holy beings, so we can receive their blessings and actualize these teachings in our minds. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Then let's do the Heart Sutra next, and then we'll recite refuge before we begin. So again, as we recite this, try to bring to mind the meaning of these words, to reflect on emptiness. Emptiness is the way we remove all of our obstacles, all of our suffering, all of our problems by realizing that profound subject. So we'll again recite this together. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagawan was dwelling on Massa Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvatiputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom. The mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. We're going to pause just a second here. We've got some folks who are in the waiting room apparently, and it's not coming up as it normally does to show me. Yeah, just got them all admitted. Okay. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. all the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. Let's go back to the refuge prayer. We'll recite this 3 times, first time in English, the other 2 in Tibetan, bringing to mind the meaning of the first 2 lines in regard to taking heartfelt refuge, finding safe direction in the 3 jewels, especially the Dharma, and then the last 2 lines where we cultivate the motivation of bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki choknam la, jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi. Daki chanyen gi pe sanam gi dola penchir sangye du parshog. Sangye chodang soki choknam la, jangchu bardu dakni kyabsu chi. Daki chanyen gi pe sanam gi dola penchir sangye druparsho. Okay, good. We made it through that. Let's go ahead and start with a short meditation, as we usually do. Give ourselves a chance to focus the mind a bit, to let go of whatever distractions from earlier in the day might be still in our minds. And then on the basis of that, we'll spend a few minutes cultivating the motivation of bodhicitta before we begin our study tonight. So again, just spend the first few minutes in silence, meditating on the breath, using whatever technique you prefer to work with the breath. Once more, if you need a suggestion, you can work with the sensation around the nostrils where you feel the air coming in and out. And just try to keep your mind with the breath, whatever meditation technique you're using. When the mind wanders, bring the mind back to the breath. So I'll ring the bowl here to begin the meditation. So now let's spend a few minutes focusing on our motivation for being here tonight. And we're about to embark on one of the shorter chapters of this text, but one that has great relevance and is very, very important on our path. This is the idea of having this sort of joyous enthusiasm for our practice. One of the powers that we'll see later in this chapter that contributes to that is the power of aspiration. We have to have a strong mind aspiring to achieve the goal of enlightenment, as well as all the various things that lead us to that state. Without that aspiration, it's pretty much impossible to induce the effort to move in that direction. So in this chapter, we see once more the importance of having bodhicitta motivation and how this can become a major factor in helping us to cultivate this joyous effort and enthusiasm for engaging in the Buddha's teachings. So take a moment to cultivate that mind right now, recalling the teachings you've had on bodhicitta, that the most important aspect of it is that we want to achieve the welfare of all beings. We see them in their state of suffering, that they lack true happiness and peace, and feeling a strong connection to them, reflecting on their kindness, we make the decision to help them, to alleviate their suffering, to lead them to the perfection that each of them can know in the state of Buddhahood. And that's the main motivation, the wish to benefit all sentient beings to the greatest degree. But then we have this assisting motivation, the recognition that we cannot possibly do this if we're not enlightened ourselves. Therefore, we're going to engage in these teachings to learn how to cultivate this joyous enthusiasm for our practice and be able to accomplish the state of Buddhahood as quickly as possible, so we can then help all other sentient beings perfectly to do the same thing. Okay, so I'm not sure if we have some brand new people. I'm going to go through, as I normally do when we start another course in the basic program or another part of a course, with just a little bit of an introduction to the basic program. But I won't spend much time on it because most of you have heard it before, and it's probably already something that you have memorized or something from the previous times. So then after I do that, I'm going to do just an overview of what we've looked at in the text so far. And then finally, do just a few of the verses of chapter 7. I hope we can make some progress in that. So again, these are the topics for tonight in this first session. So the basic program, as most of you know, was devised by Lama Zopa Rinpoche for Dharma students who want to go beyond just introductory courses and can commit to in-depth study and practice. Nonetheless, you can take this course without engaging in the basic program in a full way, but hopefully you will engage in the various things that it offers to deepen your own study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism in particular. It offers a text-based introduction to the philosophical aspects of the Tibetan Buddhist Gelugpa tradition, which is how things are taught in the monasteries. They have a text and everyone has the text in front of them, and then the teacher will give commentary on that text, going through verse by verse or page by page, what have you. There is a study component involving 9 core curriculum subjects. The Master Shantideva's text is one of those, and there are 3 supplementary subjects. If you need more information on any of this, you can go to fpmt.org, and that will give you more information on the basic program. Each subject has a completion test. When we finish this entire subject, which we hope to do through 2021, we will have an opportunity for you to study for and take a subject completion test. I'm also encouraging discussion where you can facilitate that. It's very hard with us in the format that we're in right now, but if you want to partner up with somebody from the class and do discussion outside of the class, that would be great. There is homework that I give every week that is an opportunity for you to review what I've covered, and then there's reading assignments in general, in that there is one book in particular, Geshe Yeshe Topten's book, that covers the entire text. For chapter 6, for example, we did have His Holiness's book on patience. There might be occasionally, some things that I'll bring in, but essentially it means, reading through the text and the commentary that we have from Gyaltsep Je, and then doing any additional reading that you can on this text, especially again, Geshe Yeshe Topten's book, which is in your reading list. And by the way, if any of you don't have any of these files I'm alluding to, then contact the person who's your coordinator from either Shantideva Center or Namdro Ling, and they will get those to you. Because I think we actually have all of them out on the website now at Shantideva, but we'll confirm that. There is a 3-month final review when you get to the final exam for the basic program that people participate in, to review all of the subjects, all 9 of the core curriculum subjects. But anyway, that's something way in the future. There is also an ethical behavior component, which for these courses essentially entails abiding by the 5 lay vows of not killing, not stealing, not engaging in inappropriate sexual behavior, adultery, what have you. And then the 4th one involves a verbal action, which is not lying, telling untruths. And then finally, the 5th one is not engaging or abiding or in imbibing alcohol and intoxicants. Now, again, you can't make that exclusion, like everybody, nobody can do that anywhere, during the course, but rather please don't use those substances when you're coming into the course, and try to refrain from them as best as you can, recognizing that they're not that good for our minds or our behavior. The practice component, again, I do give out a meditation every week as well that generally involves meditating on the verses that we've covered. And so it's good to do those guided meditations on your own. We haven't made an opportunity for you to be guided in them, so they're simply an assignment for you to work with. We'll see if we can fit in any kind of practice days or short retreats. Again, this is difficult given the conditions that we're dealing with. There is a 3-month Lam Rim retreat requirement for the entirety of the basic program, and there's also a service and training component, which is useful if people want to participate and help out with any of the activities. Then to get your completion certificate for the entire course, you do have to have for each individual subject an attendance and participation requirement met, which is generally to do all of the classes. If you can't be there in person, we are recording all of these and you can watch them on your own. To do the meditations as best as you can throughout the course, to follow the behavior requirement I mentioned, and then to do the subject completion test at the end. So the homework isn't required. Nonetheless, it's nice if you can hand it in. I'm finding I don't have a lot of time to correct homework, but I will do better, try to do better on that as we go forward. There's also, of course, the practice component for each of these in total that, would be important to have met the meditations. And so, I'm sorry, I think I may have gone up. I went back. Sorry, program completion requirements. If you want to complete the entire program, complete all 9 subjects, do the 3-month review I mentioned, do the final exam, and then the 3-month Lam Rim retreat, or in some cases, people find it easier to do 3 one-month Lam Rim retreats. And that's certainly, again, completely doable. So that's, again, an overview. If you need any further information on that, feel free to contact me, or once again to go to fpmt.org. So far we have covered all first 6 chapters. The way that, again, there's a summary set out is that the first 5, there's a little more detail for. 6 through 10, not quite as much. So I'm just going to go through this summary that I've gone through before. Chapter 1 was an explanation of the benefits of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment that the Bodhisattva cultivates. And for that, Abbot Dr. Gyaltsen, in another commentary that I have, he says, in order to initially generate the mind aspiring to supreme enlightenment, by way of this great treatise, Shantideva's text, through contemplating well its benefits, you need to increase the force of your enthusiasm exceptionally. This is revealed by the first chapter. The first chapter is a wonderful chapter to study. I taught this one and the next two over a weekend in October of last year at Shantideva Center, and those are available for you to review if you'd like to study that chapter and the other two, this chapter and the other two as well. Chapters 2 and 3 are sort of the practices that one engages in order to cultivate bodhicitta by way of a vow. And so we talk about how to prepare the mind for the cultivation of bodhicitta by eliminating negativities that impede its progress through confession and so on, as well as the other limbs of the 7-limb practice. They continue into chapter 3, and chapter 3 is about how we uphold that mind of enlightenment, exhorting us to fully accept it and to make that final commitment to the Bodhisattva path through taking the Bodhisattva vows. So Abbot Dr. Gyaltsen says, you must uphold the two minds of enlightenment, the mind of aspiring to enlightenment and the mind of engaging in the practices that lead to enlightenment. So the aspiring and engaging bodhicitta. By first confessing negativities and obscurations, the adverse conditions for the generation of bodhicitta. And second, accumulating the two collections, the collection of merit and the collection of wisdom, which are the favorable conditions for the generation of the mind of enlightenment. Therefore, these 2 points are respectively taught by the second and third chapters. Then the fourth and fifth chapters I taught together. Again, the recordings for that are available. The fourth is on conscientiousness, which is described as an admonishment to conscientiously maintain your bodhicitta and to prevent it from decreasing through the power of delusions in our mind. So as it says here, having generated bodhicitta through aspiring as well as engaging bodhicitta, you must rely upon your conscientiousness in order to train in the deeds of the bodhisattva, which are the 6 perfections. And that's indicated by the 4th chapter. Chapter 5, we do begin our exploration of the perfections. We skip over the first perfection, perfection of generosity, which is actually covered here and there, but primarily in the 10th chapter when we dedicate all the merits for the welfare of others, kind of giving that to others. But the perfection of morality is discussed in the chapter on guarding introspection, which is an explanation of how we guard our mind and our behavior with these 2 factors of sort of watchfulness and vigilance and mindfulness, being able to kind of be aware of what's going on in our minds and in our behavior. So the way to train in ethics by means of guarding mindfulness and introspection is extensively revealed by the 5th chapter. So that began our study of the perfections. The next perfection, which is the 3rd after generosity and morality, was covered in chapter 6. So it says, then with patience and joyous effort, which is the subject of the chapter we're beginning our study of tonight, the 7th, the ways to train in concentration, which is the 8th chapter, wisdom, which is the 9th chapter, and so forth, are respectively indicated by 4 chapters, the 6th to the 9th. So again, generosity is covered in the 10th. It says the 10th chapter indicates the way to train in the mind of giving one's body and resources, as well as roots of virtue to others, and the way to train in generosity qualified by dedication, that we're dedicating our merits and so on for the benefit of others, and in that way we're practicing generosity. So in terms of this whole section that is after chapter 5, it goes, there is a main outline, the way of training in the remaining 4 perfections. So we covered the outline from Gyaltsab Je's text of the way of training in patience in our last course. And once more, the recordings for that are available. The way of training in enthusiasm is the subject for this course. Then we'll go on to concentration and wisdom to complete the perfections. And then again, chapter 10 will be a dedication chapter. So again, the 6 perfections are on the screen. These are said to be set out in terms of increasing difficulty, that it's easiest to practice generosity, though there are some factors of generosity that are very difficult, perhaps. But morality would be the next most difficult, and so on. So we're dealing with the 4th one, which even though we found in our study of patience that patience can be quite challenging to cultivate, joyous effort is said to be even more difficult. And perhaps each of us know from our own experience in working with the Buddhist path over however many years we've studied it, that it takes a lot of diligence, a lot of effort to achieve anything with this path. We might be practicing for decades and not feel like we've made that much progress, but we have. And we need to be kind of mindful of that and recognize that we can just keep moving forward and keep increasing our effort, and we will do just fine. So this is the main subject of this 7th chapter. So I found it interesting to share this with you. This goes back to the handout for part 1 of the course, again, where I covered the first 3 chapters. In that handout, there was a summary of the first 9 chapters according to Nagarjuna's prayer on bodhicitta. You'll recognize this prayer because this is how we end all of our classes. We say, may the supreme jewel bodhicitta, first that has not arisen, arise and grow. That was chapters 1 through 3. And may that which has arisen not diminish. That was 4 through 6, where we looked at these factors that inhibit the increase of our bodhicitta, by lacking conscientiousness, by not having that guarded mind and the mindfulness that would help us to abide by good morality. And then the 6th chapter, where we look at the factors of anger and resentment and hatred and so on that need to be overcome through the practice of patience. So this is kind of the conclusion of that with the last course, was to get rid of those things that keep bodhicitta from arising newly, from diminishing, that which has arisen, to let it not diminish, to let it not decrease in its strength. Now we get into the 3 chapters that have to do with increasing our bodhicitta. Through chapter 7 with joyous effort, where we develop this enthusiasm for our practice. Chapter 8, where we cultivate deep meditative skill and ability and stabilizing the mind. And then chapter 9, where we develop the wisdom that will be the antidote to all of our problems, as well as help us to be fully qualified to help others address their problems. And then, of course, the 10th chapter is a concluding prayer of dedication for having done all of this. So it's a nice format to look at this in terms of these 3 sets of 3 chapters. And what we're primarily looking at here now is how we increase bodhicitta through having this very enthusiastic mind. So that was a rather brief overview, but nonetheless, let's get into chapter 7 and begin to look at what is called in our text joyous effort. Know that there are many different terms for this. In some translations, you might see, again, enthusiasm, which we will see in Gyaltsep Je's commentary that was translated by Venerable Fedor. The text that we're working from, the root verses, was translated by Ziggy To, and she chose joyous effort. Sometimes you'll see joyous enthusiasm or joyous perseverance, or you might even see diligence or zeal or endeavor. There are a lot of different words that the Tibetan is translated as, but we're essentially talking about when we put this energy into our practice, into our practice of virtue according to the Dharma. So I wanted to go ahead and share a little bit about effort or enthusiasm, this mental factor. And this comes from the course that some of you may have already taken on minds and mental factors, but just gives a sort of starting point to look at this factor that is once more in our minds. We're not talking about physical or verbal effort, though it might manifest that way. We're talking about mental effort that then, causes us to do prostrations physically, or to read or do the other things that are necessary on our practice of the Dharma. So the question is raised in the Compendium of Knowledge, which is a text by Asanga. What is effort? And the response is, it is a mind that is enthusiastic in regard to armoring, application, non-inferiority, irreversibility, and non-complacency. And I'm not going to give commentary on all of those. We're going to see some of these types of enthusiasm set out. There are different categorizations of enthusiasm, sometimes in 5, as what's shown on the screen here, sometimes 4, sometimes 3. I'm not going to give the 5 again because that's maybe beyond what we need to know for this course. But we will look at the 4 and the 3. It has the function of fulfilling and accomplishing the class of virtue. It's how we actually, accomplish things on our path, is through dedicating ourselves wholeheartedly to engaging in the Dharma. Now I'm going to read a little bit from Geshe Rabtin's book on mind and its functions, which covers the mental factors as well. It's a little more loosely written, not quite as technical. He says, enthusiasm is a distinct mental factor, meaning a factor within our minds that acts as the remedy for laziness and joyously engages in wholesome activity. It has the function of actualizing wholesome qualities that have not yet been actualized and bringing those that have been actualized to completion. So again, we see it playing that role of kind of helping us to progress on the path and actually achieve things. All the wholesome aspects of the path are developed by means of enthusiasm. It is through its activating force that liberation and Buddhahood are realized. Enthusiasm is the dynamic quality of mind necessary to effectively accomplish any spiritual growth and understanding. So we see again that we absolutely need this factor. I mean, even if we look at our worldly endeavors, without a doubt, just to get things done in our daily life, our work, what have you, we need effort, some dedication to what it is that we're trying to accomplish. But here we're not talking about worldly effort. We're talking about the spiritual practice and the effort we put into that, the engaging in things that will help us to progress along the path to enlightenment more quickly and more effectively, efficiently. So this is the idea behind this. Geshe-Rabten gives a nice analogy for this. He says, when a hillside of dry grass catches fire, the blaze will only spread if there is sufficient wind. And we're actually going to see this idea of wind coming up in the very first verse as being what effort is like. It's like a force of wind that fans the flames of our effort, of our movement forward, and so on. Likewise, the fire of intelligent discrimination will only be able to burn away the afflictions if it is sufficiently stirred by the wind of enthusiasm. Another way of looking at it, and we'll see that Pema Chodron, I think in her text, in that first verse, she talks about the wind behind the sail of a boat or something that allows the boat to move forward. And nowadays, of course, with our, wind energy, we can see that, we are able to tap the energy of the wind and make it into something very efficient for people. So Geshe-Rabten says, without that, otherwise, no matter how much intelligent comprehension we've attained, it will only be wasted if it is not joyously and enthusiastically applied in practical meditation. So, one thing that we're going to see as we go through this chapter is that there are many obstacles to our generating this effort, this enthusiasm, and we need some great forces that will help us on that path. But if we're finding as we go through this that there are things that, ring a bell, that we're seeing, oh yeah, I can identify with that. That's something I do. That's something that, is a pattern in my own practice. Then, to make sure that we begin to address that, because otherwise, our progress will never really happen. We'll just keep staying where we are, or perhaps even regress, even move further away from the goal. So this is the importance of enthusiasm, effort, this topic that Shantideva is discussing in this chapter. I want to bring up what I've done with the other perfections, with perfection of patience and morality, which is from chapter 5 at the beginning. There was the whole idea that all of these are perfected within our own minds. So verse 15, there's only one verse that pertained to the perfection of joyous effort. Shantideva said, although the result of generating a clear mind is Brahma and so forth, these various goals that we can attain of the Brahma abodes and what have you, the results along with body and speech will be weak in conduct. Therefore, it is not like that. So we have to have kind of a force of mind that will, help us get through to achieving whatever results it is that we want. The commentary on that from Abbat Drokpa Gyaltsen was, the fulfillment of familiarization with joyous effort is also contingent upon the mind. Because although the result of slightly generating a clear mind, enthusiastic about cultivating the meditative absorption of the first concentration and the like, which is included within meditative absorption, is rebirth in the abodes of Brahma and so forth, even though we can accomplish some mundane goals of being reborn in the upper realms as in the Brahma abodes and so on by virtue of some measure of effort. If the mind is not associated with power, with great force, the results of the mind, along with the body and speech, will be weak in energy and inferior in conduct, whereby one will not be able to be thus reborn in the first concentration and so forth. One won't get those results, and one certainly won't get the results that go beyond that, the results of enlightenment, liberation, and so on. Thus, the fulfillment of familiarization with joyous effort is contingent upon a powerful mind. It is something we perfect within our own minds. You know, so somebody may look like they're, very dedicated to practice, and maybe even you have people who are, you go on retreat and they're doing prostrations all day or something in between the sessions and what have you, and you might admire them for what looks like great effort. They might be doing that physically, but mentally they may not be fully engaged in that at all. It's very hard to tell with people. I mean, generally, when people are doing that level of work spiritually, they've got a mind that is together with that, that is inducing them to do that. But some people can do that out of pride, right? You might want to look really good, at the retreat and kind of get star pupil or something, star participant. So again, we have to be careful in terms of making sure that it's always a perfection we do within our minds, so that whatever we engage in, be it prostrations or mantra recitations or reading Dharma or meditating, it all is together with this mind that has great force. Okay, so now we're going to get into the chapter. Again, if there are any of you who don't have the full file that has the commentary on all 10 chapters, written by Gyaltsep Je and translated, Gyaltsep Rinpoche is how it's indicated there, translated by Venerable Fedor, then again, I think it should be available at Shantideva's website, and you should have the link to do that for the materials for this course. But if you're missing anything, then let your coordinator know, and we'll make sure that you get that. There are 76 verses in this chapter. That's the main part of the outline, explaining the text of the chapter. And then at the very end, we'll look at the name of the chapter, which is just a footnote really to the whole chapter. The first part, explaining the text, is divided into two. A very brief exhortation in the need to strive in enthusiasm, the first verse and the first line of the second verse. And then the way of striving in enthusiasm. Again, Master Shantideva wastes no time in getting right into how do we do this? What are the things we need to overcome, and how do we overcome them and abandon our laziness and so on? How do we engage in the powers that will help us to have great effort? So let's start with this exhortation and the need to strive in enthusiasm. There is an actual exhortation and then an identification of enthusiasm that happens in the first line of the second verse. Verse 1 says, "With patience, the subject of the 6th chapter, I should undertake joyous effort. Enlightenment will dwell in those who strive. Just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without joyous effort." So the idea here is that with having cultivated the third perfection to some degree of patience, we now should undertake the fourth, which follows naturally from this. If we've learned to have a greater perseverance and forbearance in regard to our own suffering, in regard to harm from others, in regard to our practice of the Dharma, we then should be wholeheartedly, committing ourselves to engaging fully in the Dharma through this perseverance and enthusiasm. And enlightenment will dwell in those who strive that way. And once more, the analogy we saw earlier, just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without joyous effort. So let's go into the slides that I have here. Whoops. This one, I only have this one slide for. Essentially, it's from a Sazang Mati Panchan's commentary. I've only quoted from this a couple of times. I think he's a Sakya master in the Sakya tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And in his commentary, he quotes this sutra that says, "O Vidya Sagar, for those with great diligence, accomplishing unsurpassable, perfect and full enlightenment is not difficult. If one wonders why, those who have diligence, enthusiasm, and so on, have enlightenment. And those who have laziness have a great distance to enlightenment." So it kind of gives us, the contrast of these two. There's a verse we're going to see up later in chapter 8 that is essentially saying to look at the difference between the Buddhas who have accomplished enlightenment and ourselves who are still stuck in our unenlightened state. In that context, it's mostly about cultivating bodhicitta, but the idea is that if we had put all the effort that we have put into our samsaric, our mundane affairs, into enlightenment instead, we would be just like the Buddhas. The Buddhas are different from us because they've simply committed to that path. On the training path of as a bodhisattva, they got to a point where they acknowledged that they had to, make great progress towards enlightenment. They became convinced of it, the benefits of achieving that state, and so on. So again, our study is always trying to help us to have a stable foundation of faith in the Dharma that will lead us to engage in our practice wholeheartedly. And if we do that, enlightenment will be ours. You know, if we set up all the causes and conditions that lead to enlightenment, you will be forced into enlightenment whether you want to be enlightened or not. I mean, sure, of course we want to be enlightened. The point is that it takes those causes and conditions to achieve the goal. And one of them is this perfection of joyous effort. So let's take a look at what Gyaltsab Je says in his text. This is page 1 of the section on chapter 7. He says, if one wishes to attain enlightenment quickly by being patient with austerities and harm by others, as was explained before in chapter 6, then one needs to commence the practice of enthusiasm. Enlightenment abides in those striving in this way, in the actions of the perfections. Just as without wind there is no movement of the candle flame and so forth, the accumulations of merit and transcendental wisdom will not arise without enthusiasm. It's kind of interesting. Some other commentators talk about how, you need to shield a candle from wind, but it's kind of a different analogy here. The idea is it's the wind that actually causes things to progress. Just like Geshe Rabten said, the fire will take off when there is winds, which is unfortunately what's been happening in California and other parts of the West and other parts of the world, even in Australia earlier this year and so on. But I like the analogy then of the boat, so that if you got a sailboat and the sail is there, it needs the wind to move it forward. Without the wind, the boat is going to be stagnant. It won't move at all. So then he concludes by saying, since the highest enlightenment depends on enthusiasm, one should make an effort. And then he quotes from Chandrakirti's text, the introduction to the middle way. And in that text it says, all qualities follow enthusiasm, the cause of both accumulations of merit and wisdom. So we often talk about these two, and actually Lama Zopa Rinpoche these days, he doesn't like this idea of merit and wisdom. He calls them both merit, the merit of virtue and the merit of wisdom. And the idea behind this is that we accumulate this positive potential, this merit that is involved with our behavior and our thoughts, which is bodhicitta and the actions that we engage in with that mind. That's what we mean by the accumulation of merit. It's sort of putting the gas into the tank. But then we also have the merit of wisdom. That is the wisdom that we develop about all the teachings, but primarily about the teachings on emptiness that we'll cover in chapter 9. When we have accumulated sufficient merit of wisdom and sufficient merit of virtue, we then have both elements, both wings of the bird, to help us to fly to enlightenment. But we need joyous enthusiasm for both of those. Some presentations say that the first 3 perfections are the accumulation of the merit of virtue. The last 2 are the accumulation of the merit of wisdom. Concentration and wisdom are those last 2. The 4th one, the one we're looking at here, contributes to both. Because without this joyous enthusiasm, you can't collect the merit of virtue, nor can you collect the merit of wisdom. So again, this is how Lama Zopa is talking about it these days. By the way, I should mention that Lama Zopa Rinpoche, subsequent to our coverage of chapter 6, they've just published this book called On Patience, which is Rinpoche's teachings on chapter 6. Those of you who want to go back and review chapter 6 at some point might find it useful. It's not a very thick book. He also, of course, has a book on the 6 perfections that is very nice. It's been out for a little while, and it might be good to read that as an overview of each of these. But nonetheless, again, we're looking at this idea that these 3 of our generosity, morality, and patience, they all need this factor of enthusiasm to engage in them fully. But we also need enthusiasm to engage in concentration and wisdom. And each of these will culminate in the 2 aspects of a Buddha's enlightenment. The truth body, which is the wisdom of a Buddha, the omniscient mind of a Buddha, and then the form bodies, the Rupakaya, that are the way physically that Buddhas interact with others through having generated those strong connections to other beings through compassionate motivation. So we need we need enthusiasm for both of these. Let me go on then to the second part of this first outline, identifying enthusiasm. What would be a good definition for this enthusiasm or joyous effort? What is enthusiasm? It is enthusiasm about virtue, or sometimes we call it delight in virtue. because we get in that kind of joyous element to it. It is the, joyous mind that puts energy into our Dharma practice, that is so happy to be doing our prostrations or prayers or whatever it is that we have to engage in. So let me read from Gyaltsab first before we go through some of these types of enthusiasm. I found it kind of interesting, this chapter, Master Shantideva went through the 3 types of patience in chapter 6, and he also went through the 3 types of morality in chapter 5, but he doesn't go through the 3 types of enthusiasm, or 4 or 5, depending upon which presentation you're using. But nonetheless, it's good to at least be aware of them. So Gyaltsab says, since joy for the afflictions is laziness, what then is enthusiasm? Because we can put effort and have a joyous enthusiasm about stuff that's afflicted, about all the stuff that we're attached to, all of the mundane affairs that, we get really involved in and that end up wasting our time. So what is this enthusiasm? It is the joy for a virtuous object. It is the joy for engaging in something that is wholesome, that will lead to more positive results, lead to at least creating the causes for a good rebirth, which is the motivation of someone in the small scope, leading to liberation, which is the motivation for someone in the middle scope, leading to enlightenment for someone on the great scope. Of course, we aspiring to the great scope want to do all of our practices with that highest motivation. Then, as Rinpoche says, you're guaranteed the result of liberation, the result of happiness of future rebirths. Even the happiness of this life comes through engaging in joyous effort together with bodhicitta, cultivating acts together with that altruistic mind. So he says then it has the divisions of these 4. Again, this is the 4-fold division. And you'll see a repetition of this first one, armor-like. That was even in Geshe Rabtin's definition. Armor-like enthusiasm, enthusiasm of application, enthusiasm of non-disheartenment and non-disturbance, and then the enthusiasm of non-satisfaction. Let's look at these using the handout that I created for this that has commentary on these from Geshe Jampa Tekchok. He says first, armor-like enthusiasm is an attitude where the mind is immutable, is resolute. It's kind of like we're wearing the armor against any factors that will impede it, just like someone wears armor out on the battlefield so that they don't get pierced by weapons and so on. With this, if we are engaging in a virtuous action, we think, I must engage in this without change. We don't have any, contrary factors, opposing factors that enter our minds. We just say, I'm going to engage in this. So it says it is the mind thinking, I am going to do exactly that. A mind which puts energy exactly into the goal, resolved to keep going with the action until it is finished. It has this far-reaching attitude. The second one is the applied enthusiasm, or enthusiasm of application. This is always applying ourselves in practice to exactly that virtuous mind, just as we had intended with joy. So it's again doing what needs to be done on the basis of that armor-like mind. So the armor-like enthusiasm was the mind's irreversible attitude, thinking I'm going to practice exactly that. Here, with applied enthusiasm, it is engaging in it, in practice, applying ourselves to it, just as we had it in mind with happiness and delight. So we have it in our minds through the armor-like enthusiasm, and then it gets applied in our practice. Keeps us doing, again, all the various practices that we need to do to move closer and closer to enlightenment. It occurs further when we are engaging in the action with body and speech in accordance with the idea, always keeping on it with joy and happiness, not just working at it for a month and giving it up for a month, then taking it up for another month, but giving it up again. It is to go continuously with joy and happiness. So not just have the mental thought that doesn't diminish, but the actual application physically and verbally that keeps you moving. The third one, in the translation from Venerable Federer, was called enthusiasm of non-disheartenment and non-disturbance. Here it was translated as non-discouraged enthusiasm. This is engaging in that very action that we saw in the second one, just as we had planned, our mind not being discouraged or perturbed as soon as there's a difficulty. but rather carrying on with the action, in contrast to immediately becoming discouraged, which can happen to us, right? We see the enormity of what we are engaged in, this path to enlightenment, and we can sometimes have that mind that feels like we can't possibly do that. We're going to see this as one form of laziness, is our laziness thinking we are incapable of accomplishing what it is we're setting out to do. So Geshe Jumpa Tekchok continues. He says, when we are engaging through putting energy into the action with body and speech in accordance with the idea we had in mind, again, these are the first two we just looked at, should adverse circumstances arise, this means not feeling discouraged or rocked. So this, again, makes a natural progression. The first one is having it in our minds through the armor-like. Second is in our actions through the applied, and then not being discouraged when we encounter things that might be antithetical to our continuation of that. The last one we called enthusiasm of non-satisfaction in Gyaltsab Je's commentary. Here it's persevering enthusiasm, which means to continue on with the action as much as possible without thinking that will do. In other words, oh, I think I've done enough, I think it's sufficient, after this initial burst of enthusiasm. Rather than being satisfied with having done a little virtue well, instead, we think that much should do, trying to improve continuously without a break. That we kind of keep heading for doing more, rather than thinking that what we have done is sufficient. So we persevere. We don't get satisfied with just the bit that we've done. We keep moving it forward so that we can, push the envelope, keep moving towards enlightenment. So those are the four as they're explained by Geshe Jumpa Tekchok. As I mentioned, the three that are normally set out in the Lam Rim text that you'll see if you go to the Lam Rim Chenmo by Lama Tsongkhapa and so on, which is where this is taken from. This is how they are described there. The first one is armor-like joyous perseverance. When bodhisattvas joyously persevere, prior to actively engaging themselves, they put on the armor of a preliminary enthusiastic thought, such as, for 1,000,000,000,000 sets of 3 immeasurably great eons, each composed of days as long as 1,000 great eons, I shall not relinquish my practice of joyous perseverance. So that's a pretty, major thought there. I don't know that we can even get our heads around what that means, but, this really unbelievably positive, enthusiastic mind that is the starting point, that is armored against anything that might be contrary to it. So for the sake of relieving the suffering of a single living being, I would rejoice at remaining only as a hell being until I attain Buddhahood. This is a similar thought to what we see in the Lam Rim verses in Lama Chopa, the Guru Puja, the idea that a bodhisattva would go to Avicii, the worst hell realm, for an eon for the sake of just one sentient being. To have that kind of enthusiasm that would do that willingly, whatever it takes to even help just one sentient being. As I exert myself in this manner for the sake of complete enlightenment, what need is there to mention my perseverance over a shorter period or in the face of lesser suffering? So if we set kind of those sorts of sights, we think we are armoring ourselves in order to, kind of deal with that degree of suffering and that length of time and so on. Well, then the things we have to face, which are much shorter and aren't so much suffering, will actually be much easier. The second one is usually set out in the Lam Rim as joyous perseverance of gathering virtue, that we need to have this application of ourselves to the practice of the 6 perfections in order to properly accomplish them. It's kind of similar to what we saw when we looked at morality. Remember, morality had a second type. The first type was avoiding the non-virtue, the breaking our vows and so on. The second one was the morality of gathering virtue, and here we look at the joyous perseverance of gathering virtue. And the third one for morality was the same as this, essentially, the joyous perseverance of acting for the welfare of living beings, whereas that was the morality, engaging in, the welfare of others, doing what we can to benefit other beings through our morality. And that being kind of a unique way that the bodhisattvas abide by a morality that is always trying to help others. Well, here, it's the same idea of those actions, but doing it with this joyous mind The joyous perseverance of acting for the welfare of living beings is properly applying yourself to the practice of the 11 activities for others' welfare. So you might recall these. I've repeated the screen from that course. It was for chapter 5, where we saw those 11 types of beings. The 11 types of living beings that we want to be dedicated to helping, to benefiting, are those who need help, makes sense. Those who are confused as to the proper method of doing what needs to be done, and so on. Those who have given help, those afflicted by fear, afflicted with sorrow, those who are poor in goods, those who want a dwelling, those who want mental harmony, those who proceed correctly, and those who proceed wrongly, and those who need to be disciplined by supernormal powers, which, if we do have such powers, we need to do what we can to benefit those. But this is this whole idea that the Bodhisattva in this context wants to have this joyous mind that isn't satisfied with just meager help to other beings, but really wants to help them to the greatest possible degree. So that concludes my sort of additional slides I threw in there for this whole discussion of enthusiasm to get us started. Now we're going into the main part of the chapter, which is all the remaining verses, which is the way of striving in enthusiasm. This is divided into two parts. The first one begins on page 2 of Gyaltsabje's commentary. It's called Abandoning the Conditions Obstructing Enthusiasm. And the second one starts somewhere, I think around, must be page 15, where we look at increasing the antidote, the power of enthusiasm. So we kind of see how we have to abandon the things that are in contrast to it, that are going to inflict damage on our enthusiasm, dampen it, and so on. And then we have the antidote, the powers that will help us to grow our enthusiasm. This is where we get into the 4 powers, one of which I mentioned in the meditation tonight, this power of aspiration. But we'll see those when we get to that section. First, we have to look at abandoning these conditions that obstruct our enthusiasm. The 2 outlines within this are first identifying the obstructing conditions, which is what we do in this remainder of verse 2. And then we have the way of abandoning them, which is the rest of the chapter, verses 3 through 30. I'm sorry, the rest of this section, this outline heading, which is all the way through verse 30. Verse 2 BCD, the last 3 lines says, its discordant classes should be explained. They are laziness, adherence to what is negative, and despising oneself out of despondency. So here, this term laziness that is used here, sometimes that is used as encompassing all 3 of these ideas. So the first type of laziness that is spoken to, we're going to see more on this in just a moment, is a sort of indolence, and not doing anything, an attachment to inactivity, to not spending the time that we need to, putting it off. This is included in that, kind of procrastinating. That's what we often just call laziness, and that's why Ziggy in her translation put this as the first one. The second one is an adherence to what is negative, meaning that I sometimes call this the laziness of busyness. It's the fact that we have so many things that we would much rather put our time into that are actually negative. They are actually sources of great attachment for us, or they, at least are not causing us to move forward in our path. We fill our lives with so many things that we are quite attached to getting done, and we don't put Dharma at the top of the list. And so that's a form of laziness, because we're not giving the commensurate amount of time and energy to our practice of the Dharma. We're giving more time and energy to our mundane affairs. And then the third is this one I alluded to a short while ago, which is sort of putting ourselves down, despising ourselves out of despondency, thinking that we can't possibly accomplish all the things that are set out in the path. We can't, develop good concentration and so on. So let's go through Gyaltsabje's commentary, and then I'll share a few more slides that talk about this from a couple of different texts. I'm not going to bring in quite as many things going forward. I'm just doing that tonight because we're introducing a few key concepts. The first, of course, is enthusiasm, effort, and now we're looking at the opposing force, which is laziness. This variations on it that we see. So on page 2, Gyaltsabje says, I shall explain the antithesis of enthusiasm, which is laziness, this enemy of enthusiasm. There is one, the laziness that grasps at the happiness of lazing around, where body and mind are non-pliant. That's that first one. We get quite attached to the pleasure of just collapsing on the couch, and maybe binging on Netflix or whatever. But just that idea of just not moving forward, not wanting to do it, keeping us from getting on our cushion or reading the Dharma or what have you. Then there's the laziness that grasps at the negative, that gets quite caught up in all of our mundane things. It can spend a lot of time and energy, acquiring resources, money, and what have you. Now, again, we can engage in some of those activities with a virtuous mind. It's not to say that they are completely to be abandoned, because we still do have to make money. We still do have to live and make meals and do all the various things we do. We don't want to do those with attachment, though. We want to do those with virtuous minds as much as possible. Then the third is the laziness that puts oneself down, thinking, I cannot do this, after having become discouraged. So this is that laziness that is, they say, the worst of these three, though I would certainly challenge that for some of us, the worst can be the first one, because we just keep putting things off, and it becomes a real problem if we get into that habit, that pattern. But if right from the beginning we think we can't do it, well, then there is a real major obstacle to moving in that direction. So obviously, all three of these, we have to do our own assessment to see which ones have inflicted us and which ones are we struggling with. Once more, I'm going to share from the Minds and Mental Factors text that is used in the basic program, how laziness is described, which is one of the secondary afflictions. Enthusiasm is one of the virtuous mental factors. Here we're looking at an afflicted state of mind. Asanga's text says, what is laziness? It is a non-enthusiasm of the mind engendered by the comfort of lying down, reclining on one side and slouching about, and is involved with ignorance. This is the root, the three roots of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. It is mostly aligned with ignorance. It is a dulling of our mind, not seeing that we need to move in a virtuous direction, and so we just chill out and relax and don't do anything. It has the function of hindering application to the class of virtue. So they don't really get so much into the various types of this, but in that text. But let's take a look at what Geshe Rabten has to say in his book, Mind and Its Functions. He says, laziness is a mental factor that, having firmly grasped at an object offering temporary happiness, either does not want to do anything wholesome, or although wanting to, is faint-hearted, is despondent in the face of that. Whoops. It has the function of causing the power of enthusiasm to decrease. Again, it is antithetical to our enthusiasm. It acts as a basis for the degeneration of wholesome tendencies that have already been amassed, as well as for the prevention of any fresh production of virtue. The first kind of laziness, he says, is that of idleness or sloth. This is a dull quality of mind that lacks any interest in Dharma and simply wishes to sink into an indifferent state of sleepiness or dullness, just kind of, again, relax, chill out. If we do need to watch Netflix or do whatever we do, we can once more do those things with a mind that is more virtuous. But this is that mind that just doesn't really want to even entertain those thoughts, doesn't even want to bring to mind any Dharma, just wants to, hang out in that pleasurable place of not doing anything, which, again, we might have moments where we do that, but if this becomes a pattern, it can be very problematic. The second, which again is the third in Shantideva's presentation and in what we just saw in Gyaltsab, this is the laziness that's that of self-pity. This becomes manifest in thoughts such as, I am so inferior that I could never attain any insight or liberation. It's a needless indulgence based upon a deprecation of one's own potential. Every one of us has Buddha nature. Every one of us has the potential to achieve enlightenment. Maybe we can't do that in this life, but we can certainly try. We can do whatever we can to move in that direction and still even hold that thought that we want to become enlightened as quickly as possible. But nonetheless, that's, contrary to what the actual potential is, especially with this human life that we have and all of the richnesses and endowments that are part of this life. The third type of laziness, which again is the second one in our presentation. This is called here attraction to evil. And this is a Stephen Batchelor's translation of Geshe Rabten from many, many years ago. So I don't know, we don't use the word evil so much, but nonetheless, attraction to those things that are not so wholesome, that are, again, more mundane. This is often confused with enthusiasm, since it too is characterized by perseverance. As I said, even in our worldly affairs, we need that diligence and dedication to what we're doing to accomplish anything. But perseverance towards that which is unwholesome is what we're talking about here, not that which is beneficial. All efforts we make towards accomplishing worldly goals, even when they are joyfully undertaken, are in fact a form of laziness. Now, again, if you do those things with a more virtuous motivation, they can be transformed. And Geshe Jampa Tekchok mentions this in his commentary. And even Lama Zopa Rinpoche often emphasizes this, right? He says that we should have bodhicitta mindfulness. So for every day we're going to work with the motivation of bodhicitta, thinking that I'm going to do this more mundane thing, and and even though you might really like your job, you're really attached to your job in terms of it's something fun and enjoyable, you can do it with that motivation that thinks, this is so that I can accumulate the resources that will help me to sustain this body, to be able to use this life well, to use those resources as I can to benefit other beings through my making offerings, through my being generous and kind with those resources, and so on. Well, then it's a very different act, right? Everything starts with the mind. So once more, it's not to say that just because it's falling into this category of a mundane or worldly activity, that's the problem. It's the mindset that we have towards those activities. A lot of people have great attachment towards what they do during their day, and it has nothing to do with furthering any good qualities. So this is the sort of caution on this, is that we can do some of these activities with a much more wholesome mind. Now we get into the actual way of abandoning them, which is, thank you, Shantideva, you give us all this wonderful advice about how to get rid of these factors of laziness that we just discussed. We're going to see it in three parts. The first part, which is up through verse 14, is this first one, abandoning the laziness that has gotten a taste for lazing around, for not doing anything, for being indolent. The second one will be just a single verse, abandoning the laziness that grasps at negative actions. The third will be abandoning the laziness of discouragement, which is the remaining verses up through verse 30. So let me just again give you what is in your handout on this one. Geshe Acharya Lodin, who is was a monk Geshe who taught in Australia, Melbourne, I think. Anyway, he wrote a wonderful contemporary Lam Rim book called Path to Enlightenment in Tibetan Buddhism. It's a bit difficult to find and a bit expensive when you can find it. Bought mine many, many years ago at not such a high rate, but he calls it the laziness of procrastination. And he says, with the laziness of procrastination, you have a willingness to practice the Dharma, but a sense that there is no time for it now. You postpone engaging in virtue until later. You keep putting it off. And you just, again, don't, there can be that other side of it that you essentially don't do anything. You just kind of continue to, hang out in that place of relishing the pleasure of not being engaged in something. So again, we're going to see this divided into two more parts. The first one, verse 3, introduces this. It says, abandoning laziness upon investigating its cause. And then the second one will be the way of abandoning, where we look at the actual techniques, the thoughts that Master Shantideva gives us to overcome that type of laziness. So verse 3 says, because of relishing the pleasurable taste of indolence and craving based on sleep, from not being disillusioned with the suffering of psychic existence, laziness grows very strong. Now there's a lot of different commentary about how many things are set out here as the cause of this type of laziness. But nonetheless, I'm going to use Geshe Sopa's commentary on this to go through this, and then we will come back and take a look at what Gyaltsab Je says and kind of compare it. First, from Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise, the Lamrim Chenmo, which is what Geshe Sopa comments on, Tsongkhapa even says, and I've put the numbers in here, they weren't in the original text if you go to this page of volume 2 of the Lamrim Chenmo. The causes for the production of laziness are indolence, attachment to the taste of inferior pleasures, craving the pleasure of sleep, and a lack of disenchantment with cyclic existence. In other words, we don't have strong enough renunciation. We haven't developed that to the greater degree so that we feel compelled to do whatever we can to practice as much as possible. So let's look at what Geshe Sopa says on this. He first quotes that verse, and this is another translation of it then, the one that we just read. Laziness arises from craving based upon indolence. That would be his first factor that Tsongkhapa is talking about. Enjoyment of pleasure, an attachment to various pleasurable things that we experience, and attachment to sleep, that we enjoy sleep. And from a lack of disenchantment with the suffering of psychic existence. That's the fourth of these. Some assert that the first two lines indicate the form that laziness takes rather than its causes. Oh, I'm sorry, this is from Lama Tsongkhapa still. So that's the translation of the verse that Geshe Sopa ends up commenting on. So that's where you see that there are four, which is kind of hard to derive from the translation that we have. But let's see what Geshe Sopa says on each of these four. He starts off by saying that this stanza is not describing laziness in regard to the ordinary activities we're supposed to do or that we engage in habitually. For example, if we promised our friends that we would go hunting with them, which I can't imagine, but anyway, but do not get up in time to go with them in the morning, others would call that laziness. But that's not laziness in this context. I think he was teaching in Wisconsin, and I have relatives in Wisconsin, and they like to hunt. So here, laziness is anything that prevents or discourages joy in performing wholesome activities. First, because of attachment to inferior activity, we postpone doing proper work. In other words, to wanting to enjoy a happiness that is more easily achieved, an inferior activity which is chilling out on the couch. We don't do proper work. We postpone. We become indolent. Second, we are attached to the taste of ordinary pleasure, such as sitting comfortably or eating delicious food or whatever it is. We get quite attached to these ordinary pleasures, and we can spend a good part of our day doing those rather than engaged in practice. Third, we enjoy sleeping. They do say that as you progress on your path, you do get to a place where you can no longer sleep, and it's perfectly fine. You get what's called the sort of the rest of concentration through your meditative abilities. You are able to replenish the body without needing to go into patterns of sleep. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is said to not sleep, as are many great masters in our tradition. So we enjoy sleeping, though. We're quite attached to sleeping. We love to sometimes even have our little naps during the day and have that little taste of sleep to, fill that need. So, and fourth, we lack revulsion to cyclic existence. We don't have renunciation. If we do not see any faults in samsara and our situation seems wonderful, naturally we will be attached to it. This is a hindrance because if we are not revolted by the problems of samsara, we will not want our own emancipation, our own liberation, nor will we feel the need to attain Buddhahood out of concern for other sentient beings, that loftier goal of complete enlightenment. So again, these will be on the slides that I'll share with the folks at Shantideva. They'll get them out on the website so you can take a look at those. And this will probably also be part of the meditation for this week, is to take a look at this first factor of laziness and its causes. We could see some of those contributing to the other types of laziness, but I think these are mostly things that make us very indolent. Geshe Sopa also says what Lama Tsongkhapa said, commenting on this stanza. Some people say that indolence and attachment to pleasure and sleep are forms of laziness rather than causes of it. But this isn't an important distinction. It's good to just identify what are the factors that do get in the way. And there are those four that were spelled out here. So Gyaltsab on page 2 says, should it be asked what the causes for laziness are? 1, if one views lazing around without engaging in virtue to be happiness, so if one kind of has that pattern of being attached to that lesser form of pleasure, of just sitting around, being indolent, then 2, one develops a taste for this happiness and grasps at it for those and lesser forms of pleasure that are not about engaging in the Dharma. And 3, the craving based on sleep, generate laziness. This is how I interpret. Again, the numbers aren't there. This is my using what Geshe Sopa said to look at Gyaltsab commentary. And those generate laziness, which then causes one to be not the least afraid of cyclic existence and to not tire of its sufferings. So some presentations, commentators, will say that the first three do kind of contribute to the final one. Obviously, that being the big one. If we had renunciation, we would not waste a second. We're going to see this coming up later in the commentary. There's this idea that you would practice like your hair is on fire. You would practice as if it was burning and you needed to do something immediately to get rid of it. But we don't have that level of renunciation yet. We might have some annoyance with some of the things in samsara, but have we developed this distaste for samsara that is driving us then to engage wholeheartedly in our practice? I mean, admittedly, I don't have it yet. A lot of us still are striving towards achieving that. This points out the essence of the path once more, that we have to achieve these lesser realizations if we're going to engage wholeheartedly in the Bodhisattva practice. The perfection of joyous effort can't come about without at least our own renunciation, much less bodhicitta that goes beyond wanting to be free ourselves from suffering and wanting to free others from theirs. So, and recall also, of course, that this form of laziness is itself a cause of suffering. This is what is keeping us from engaging in even the virtue that will get us to a good rebirth in our next life, much less liberation and enlightenment. So it is important that we identify this as an enemy, especially this first type, that is this slothfulness, indolence, lazing around, being quite attached to that, and not really getting up and doing what needs to be done. So let me check in, because it's about 7-8 minutes before we conclude, before we continue on to the way of abandoning. I just want to see if there were any questions that people might have or comments that people would like to make on what I've rather rapidly covered tonight. It feels like I was going quickly. Maybe I wasn't going that quickly, but anyone? Yeah, Sheila.
I guess just to mention, I put the link for the text and readings in the chat for everybody.
Wonderful, Sheila. And that's the same link that you will find the documents that I'll make available tomorrow to Jennifer will post those, I think. Yeah, it'll be the slides from today, the meditation, and the homework assignment. Good.
Right. And then I think she posts a video when it's ready.
Oh, and the video. That's right. That will also be out there. Yeah. Anyone else have anything they'd like to comment on or ask? No? Okay, well then I'm going to do a few more minutes, because I do want to kind of keep things moving forward and not waste any time. We only have 4 more classes to get through this chapter. And again, it's not such a long chapter, and it's relatively easygoing, not so complicated. Let's look at the way of abandoning. This is divided further into, whoops, did I go up one too many? Yeah, abandoning upon investigating whoops, what did I do here? Okay, abandoning, maybe I put the wrong title for that. No, here it is, okay. Abandoning laziness by contemplating the disadvantages of this life. The next one will be abandoning by contemplating the disadvantages to the next life, the sufferings that we'll have to experience in the next life. So first we're going to look at pertaining to this life. This is divided further into 3 parts, explaining with an example, and then the other 2 parts that we'll get to next week. Explaining with an example has first the outline on page 3 that says one sees directly how one is destroyed by death, and then we'll explain it actually with the example related to this. So first, verse 4, enmeshed in the snare of disturbing conceptions, you have entered the snare of birth. Why are you still not aware that you have gone into the mouth of the Lord of Death? This is pointing out the fact that one of the most immediate ways to get us to move away from this form of laziness is to recognize that every one of us is mortal, that we are inevitably going to have to experience death, and that moreover, it's uncertain when death will happen. Now, I won't go through the whole death awareness meditation. I did do a brief review of that in course 1 pertaining to chapter 2 when we looked at confessing our downfalls. Master Shantideva spent a fair amount of time saying we need to be really attentive to confessing our downfalls, because we could die at any time. And if we die with those negativities sort of imprinted on our minds, they will cause future suffering. Well, here the idea is that we have to remember death, because this is one of the biggest factors to motivating us to engage in Dharma practice. Because we don't know when death will come, we might think I can put it off till tomorrow or till next year or till when I'm, in my 70s, 80s, whatever, when I'm older and retired and can do all the Dharma practice I want. Well, death could come before then. Death could come tonight. We have no idea when death will happen. And moreover, we tend to even negate or deny our own mortality to a large degree. Here I've shared just an interesting little passage that I loved that Joan Halifax Roshi, who's here in Santa Fe as part of the Upaya Center, her book, Being with Dying, she says, a few years ago, a dying friend read me some lines from the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. They made me smile. Virtuous King Yudhishthira, who's the son of Yama, who is the Lord of Death, is asked, what is the most wondrous thing in the world? And Yudhishthira replies, the most wondrous thing in the world is that all around us people can be dying, and we don't believe it can happen to us. So this is a big obstacle to our path, right? If we are somehow denying our own death or denying the uncertainty of our death, that's problematic because death could come well before our old age and so on when we are planning to put so much more time and energy into our practice. So here Gyaltsab says on page 3, similar to animals that cannot escape death because they are ensnared in a trap, one has fallen into the trap laid by the hunter that is the affliction of laziness, and so forth. It's through our own laziness that we've fallen into this trap of being under the control of our afflictions and having to take rebirth and then having to die and having to take rebirth again and so on. Being thus controlled, one is snared by the trap of birth that connects one with the next life, and hence one finds oneself in the mouth of the Lord of Death. How can you still not know this, Gyaltsab says? Strive in virtue. We have to really get this. One way to augment this study of this is to look at the 12 links of dependent arising that spell out the process by which, through the force of our ignorance, other factors come into play that lead us to being born again and then aging and eventually dying. The last link of the 12 is aging and death. The first link is ignorance. As long as we are under the control of that affliction, as well as certainly our laziness, all the other things, we will continue to cycle from life to life in that way. The 12 links of dependent arising are taught in the middle scope of the Lam Rim. So you might take a look there. And let me go ahead and I don't think it'll take long to go through the other verse in this section, and we can finish off that section explaining it with an example. Shantideva says, do you not see that the Lord of Death is systematically slaughtering your species? It's just coming continually, one after another. Any craving based on sleep is like a buffalo with a butcher. The idea being here that if you had a cow or a buffalo or a sheep or anything that is in the yard watching their fellow creatures being butchered, slaughtered to be taken to market, you just keep watching other people go and you don't get that you have to do something to address this situation. You actually have to, rectify things. So here Gyaltsab says at the bottom of page 3, do you not see directly that the Lord of Death is killing the old, young, and middle-aged of your kind? You see it, and yet you develop craving based on sleep. This is unsuitable, for example, like the buffalo that is seeing directly that the butcher is killing sequentially the other buffaloes, and yet he's unworried and abides leisurely because kind of keeps eating grass and thinks there's no big deal, So this is a nice analogy for what we're doing to some extent. All around us, we see people dying, as Yudhishthira said, but yet we somehow think it's not going to happen to us. We keep going about every day sort of blind to that reality. So again, part of this course would certainly be to look at the meditation on death awareness that is taught in 9 points in the Lam Rim. I'm not going to make that part of this course, but know that that is one of the most effective ways to begin to address this form of laziness that we have. If we really get it, then every day when we wake up, we'll be so glad that we have another day in this life, but we won't want to waste it in any way. We're going to want to do as much virtue as possible so that we can have good results in our future lives, we can have liberation, we can have enlightenment, and we can lead others to enlightenment too. Okay, wonderful. Let's go ahead and do our dedication prayers then. Again, if you did have any additional questions that came up, feel free to take note of them and write them to me or put them in the chat box at the beginning of the next class, and I'll be sure to answer them. Let's do the dedication prayers that we generally do. First, dedicating all this merit for the best possible result, our own enlightenment, so we can then lead others to the same state. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. But again, bringing to mind, having recited that, the thoughts we talked about earlier, that we're in this chapter that's helping us to increase our bodhicitta more and more, and really develop that aspiration that will help you to cultivate this joyous enthusiasm for your practice. Lastly, let's do the prayers for our precious teachers, for these two who are His Holiness and Lama Zopa. As we recite this, think we're also creating the causes for all our gurus and all the guides in the world that are helping others on their spiritual path to have good health and long lives, and for all of us to never be separated from perfect guides in all our lifetimes. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Then lastly, as we usually do, let's dedicate for anyone that we're holding in our hearts right now. And no doubt every one of us have individuals who are experiencing obstacles or illness, who are dying or perhaps who have died, who we want to dedicate for. And we also may have other people, parts of the world where there's great suffering, such as in California with the fires affecting both humans and animals there, other parts of the world where there are disasters and illness and so on. Extend your heart out, sending this positive energy out to all of these beings, and think that this becomes the cause to immediately remove their suffering and to create all the conducive conditions for them to find true peace and happiness. And through these efforts, may all beings have this result of perfect peace and happiness. Wonderful. Thank you. I only went 3 minutes over. That's not too bad. So again, we will be meeting over the next 4 Mondays, continuing the study of Chapter 7. If you'd like to read along with this Geshe Yeshe Topten's book, it can be quite beneficial. And if you have any other commentaries on this, they're also quite nice. And again, those are all in the reading list. Thank you all, and have a very good week. And thank you all for...
Thank you, Don.
You're very welcome, Simati. Thank you for allowing me to teach this. I love teaching this text. So.
Thank you, Don.
So grateful.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You all be well. Take care now.
Everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.